Good morning, Sandhya Suri. Thank you very much for taking time to reflect on your beautiful film Santosh that was screened on MOOV Festival. Um, Maybe the first question that I have is, why did you decide to name your main character Santosh, which is a name which is usually given to men rather than women?
Well, it's one of those gender neutral names, actually. We have quite a few of them in India. Um, and I wanted a name that could be a boy's name or a girl's name. Um, and it was more for the meaning of the name that I chose that name.
Mhm.
The word Santosh means contentment, satisfaction. And I felt that I was writing this character who was always a little hungry, always looking for something a bit more than what she's told she can have, and always on that search. So for me, it was a sort of search for satisfaction.
Yeah.
Uh, Primarily came from the meaning of the name.
Okay. So when we dive into the story and go through the whole film, what we encounter is, I would say, a deeply patriarchal, even often a misogynist society. Is that a fair depiction? Is that a fair impression of what India, northern India, is for women?
No, I mean, I think the problem is that sometimes because the film is so realistic, you know, this is not a depiction of a particular place. I think all these issues exist,
Mhm.
misogyny, religious. There are many fault lines in Indian society of religion, caste, gender, and corruption and violence are closer to the surface and less hidden than they are in other places. That is all true. I think what makes the film feel so intense is that obviously it's all in one place and in one story
Mhm.
in what and for me it was very much about um in order to make it not such a sort of an issue film about one thing, I wanted more to evoke a type of straw dogs cinema, a type of place where everything is rotten, where all of these things exist very casually. And it was about the casual nature of these views that I was wanting to put the film's focus because my interest dramatically was to say, what happens if you put Santosh, this woman who's only known the kitchen of her household, and you place her here under this real government scheme of appointment on compassionate grounds. So for me, it having it so densely layered with so many issues is not so much about, okay, everything is like that, but to say these issues do exist. They're obviously intensified in one place, and to examine what happens to people if you expose them to casual prejudice of all
Mm.
nature.
I'm sure that people who are watching the movie in the beginning wondered whether there really is such a rule in Northern India that you inherit the job, or whether it is a fictional intervention of the director.
No, that's when reality is better than fiction, right? That is it's nationwide, it's a government scheme, and it's a great scheme that I think only India has, which means that on appointment on compassionate grounds, if you fall within a certain income bracket and you're a dependent of someone who was in government service, which includes the police, and they die, then you can inherit their job. So yes, it is very real thing.
Okay, so we see Santosh, who lost her husband, whom she loved very much, and then becomes part of this police force that he was working for and where he lost his life. She is desperate, but then she gains agency when she enters the force, even reluctantly. But that is one of the things that makes the film, I think, so strong. Is that you have this woman who is not destined to act, but all of a sudden gains this agency. Is that one of the things that you wanted to stress throughout the movie?
Absolutely. I mean, as we can use words interchangeably, agency, power. status, all of these things. Especially, I think what was so poignant for me is the idea of the status she loses as a wife once she becomes a widow, which is not a great status to have in Indian
Mhm.
society, to then move to have this uniform of such importance, such power, so loaded, this uniform, and to have her have that. And then the film is just going to examine these little trespasses of power, these little bending and compromises and use of the power. It's a look at what type of a slippery slope that can go on, because once you have that uniform, it only feels natural and honest that at some level there's going to be experimentation of what power that uniform gives her.
Yeah. Because when she steps into the force, she steps into basically male roles, and as you say, acquires power, which is connected with rather a male gender than the female gender, and she becomes or she takes over some of the abuses that come with that role and that power. Is that inevitable? Can people escape that?
Well, I mean, just two things. One is that she comes into a woman's role in the police, actually, which is very much a social sort of women's help desk role, where it's more about counseling couples and this and that. That's what we see at the beginning until Geeta pushes her out a bit further. So then she's sort of in the spotlight. And for me, it was very important that I find her an intelligent character, but she is also moldable. She is a fish in water, looking around her and looking how things are done and trying to learn. And Geeta sees her as someone I think to be shaped in a very pragmatic way. So for me, that female inspector says to her for the first time, I think she's the first woman in her life who says to her, "You've done great, you're smart, you can do more." And that sense of pride in her intelligence and in her agency um, then becomes a bit distorted because I think the thing about Santosh in the film is she wants to do well. She's she has feelings for the case and what's happened to this girl, which are well-founded and honest. Um, but she doesn't quite question enough. It's about following orders without questioning and learning from what is around you. So yes, I think, and then there's what I said that she does have this ambition. She does have this thing to get ahead, to do well. And it just becomes very gray morally around those issues. So there
Yeah.
is a sense of inevitability in the genre also. This is a noir film. It was always supposed to feel like things are going to get worse and worse and worse for her.
And it's of course it's a work of fiction, so it's an open question. But is this also does how does this relate to the reality as you see it? Is there this descending into abuse of power further and further as you encounter it in India as well, or in police forces around the world, not just in India?
I mean, that is the story of the police film, isn't it? That power, and any, many films, but power corrupts.
Yeah.
So in a very simple way, it's a very classic storyline. But in terms of reality, as I was saying earlier, these things have not been plucked out of thin air. Dalit girls are much more likely to get, I think, more than twice as likely to get raped than an upper caste women. So they're disproportionately abused. There is custodial abuse in the police that has been well documented by human rights, groups. Um, so all of these things, the daily violence against women, these are all things that exist for sure. But all I'm saying is that because they all come in one film, they may
Mhm.
feel a little more intense than daily life in India.
Yeah. Because you mentioned the caste aspect, the fact that the case around which much of the action in the second part of the film uh, circles is a Dalit girl, which for people who are not so acquainted with the caste system was used to be the untouchable caste, the lowest caste in the caste system. That is almost casually set aside both by the police force and by the villagers or by the higher caste inhabitants of the region. Which makes also there was one article I read about caste and sexual violence, which said that society doesn't accept sexual violence if the victim is an ideal victim, if she is high caste enough, if she is studying, if she is urban, if she is class, then you get a public outcry. If she's low caste and rural, there's hardly anything that would happen. Is it only because there's a female as inspector that this case moves further? Could it be with a male inspector as well?
I mean, there's a lot in what you've just said. One part is that I think that's first in terms of starting the film. I think that's really what made me want to tell that story of a Dalit girl who was raped because being in India a lot and just seeing little paragraphs about these things constantly and feeling so shocked at how outrageous the stories were, but how little it seemed to matter because there were just so many of them. That did change with time. There've been very, very high profile cases also of lower caste women being raped and big national scandals and outrages about, several prominent cases. So that has changed somewhat. But I think that also has relevance everywhere in the world. What was she wearing? What was she doing? Did she invite it? In a different cultural sphere, the ideas are the same in different cultural codes of you know of who that person was and the narrative around that rape. So I think that's sort of understood globally. Um, in this particular case, yes, Geeta Sharma is brought in to be the female spokesperson, so she's a very good media presence. Um, you could ask yourself how much she is being used in this machination around this case, to put forward a female rhetoric around how it's going to be dealt with, how much is for show and how much is really to get the job done, and how much she knows about her role
Yeah.
in that.
Yeah. The boy that is suspected of the rape then turns out to be a Muslim boy, and that's another layer of discrimination, you could say, or prejudice, and leads to violence, even from the side of Santosh, uh, because it relates to the death of her husband. Um, would you say, some people say, let me put it this way, some people say that, especially in northern India, Muslims are the new untouchables. Is that true, you feel?
I mean, just to talk about my film, because I can't, I don't want to make massive generalizations or
Mm,
everything, because I'm talking about a piece of work. Um, Obviously, there is a big discourse around this in India at the moment, you know, and I think it was important for me that, let's put it this way, I think an Indian audience could see Salim coming and know that he was probably not the guilty one.
mm,
That's the most succinct answer I can give to that. Um, but even in terms of, and for me, it was a lot about how everything is politicized. So Santosh's husband's death becomes very politicized in this film by others. It starts off in a moment of pure grief for this woman, right? But
yeah,
then shortly after that, someone she doesn't know how her husband dies. There was rioting, communal rioting, but she doesn't know. But several times it's mentioned that it must have been a Muslim who killed him,
mm,
just as a fact. It's fed to her as a fact. Oh, there was some Muslim who killed him, wasn't it? Sharma says it. The old inspector, Thakur, also insinuates that something like that was the case. So for me, she's drip fed a position by those in authority around her, which is important and which seeps into her brain because she is very much a sponge in this film. And the second thing is there is this trajectory of her grief, which is being politicized by others, including, Sharma says to her just before she goes to look for Salim that, she has had no justice. How is this possible? So things become confused in her mind. Um, and there's also a question for me about, again, Geeta Sharma. What does she believe? Is she making a performance for the men who are not her men at the moment of that interrogation around her hardness, around her Islamophobia, as part of the performative nature of her job, because there's a whole theme in the film about what is performance and who is it for.
Yeah. One of the things that I felt at the end of the movie, watching Santosh go through the different stages of her development, is that she's a very lonely figure. Even though Sharma takes her into her orbit and lifts her up, she remains this very lonely figure. Is how important is that as a theme in the film, the lonely woman?
I mean, grief is a lonely place, I feel. And uh, you know, grief is a lonely place, and I feel there was something also about her having had no privacy in that grief. It just felt that there were it's very hard for her to grieve. So I feel that was important. Also, it is a genre film at a level. It's a very realistic genre film, but it is a genre film. It is a noir. I don't need her to have a confidant to to talk about, how bad everything is in the system. For me, lonelier than Santosh even is Sharma. Sharma is really lonely for me. She's the loneliest figure in this, somehow. And there was something that was important for me, which was after the interrogation, when there is this festival of color, Holi, and all the policemen are getting drunk and throwing paint at one another. They, in their camaraderie as men in the police, they are able to have this release together, to drink, to forget, to party. There's something between them. But it just occurred to me that once she has crossed her threshold after that interrogation, she can't join them. She cannot join them.
Mm.
She's apart from them somehow. And that feels like a very lonely place to be. So she decides to act like a man. She can't actually join them properly. And I thought that was interesting and important.
Because they don't also, even if she performs the same kind of violence, they will still not accept her. And maybe one of the crucial scenes in the film is when that's earlier on in the film when Santosh is trying to eat and she is gazed at by this colleague, and then she stuffs herself and throws it all out. This throwing up is very symbolic, I feel.
Absolutely, absolutely. That came very instinctively in the writing. That was about, that's just from being in India a lot and even as a young girl thinking, why is everyone staring at me so much and not being able to do anything to stop them staring, making bad faces, laughing at them, swearing at them, looking down. Nothing worked. Nothing. They just keep staring. So for me, then I felt like at that stage, of swallowing the male gaze all the time, at some point, metaphorically, literally also, it will come up.
Yeah,
And so, she made a very impressive show of that.
that was indeed very impressive. Just to
So
round up our conversation, if you would want to synthesize or say write in two lines, what should people remember, or what is I'm trying to avoid the word message, but what are you trying to bring forward with the movie from your side? I mean, people watch the movie and take from it what they take from it, but what are you bringing to the audience with Santosh?
I feel my answer would be too long because
Okay.
I either don't have an answer or I have an answer that's too long and in several parts, right? So one thing is I want the audience to move away with a feeling, and that feeling is for me. There's only one piece of music that is scored in the film. There's only three pieces of music in total, and that one piece of music is a score that is on the end credits. And it's only made of female voice. And for me, emotionally, it is a mixture of rage and indignation and sadness and melancholy and urgency. And it sort of brews in your stomach and sits with you. And that's what I want the film to do in terms of feeling. Um, I don't have black and white messages about what the film is about. The film is about leaving a lot of space for the viewers to ask themselves questions. There is a lot of space in there for the viewer and a lot of conversations to be had after the film. But again, emotionally, I'm going to talk about two images, um, both of which are very important, the two most important images in the film for me. One is of the young couple who she sees at the station at the end of the film, behind the passing train. For me, that couple, they are runaways going to Mumbai. They are ghosts of Salim and ghosts of Devika, and also of her love for her husband. And they, for me, were a pinpoint of lightness, truth, love, beauty of what can be between a man and a woman, between lovers on that platform as an antidote to all the darkness around, you know? So that's very important for me that there is hope, actually, and there is beauty in and love, but that it mustn't get mired in all the filth around it. And the last point is the other very important thing for me is the fact that I did not end the film on Santosh. I never wanted that. I knew it. I wanted and I had to end the film on that little girl, probably, you know, a very low caste girl on the platform at night on her own, unprotected in that place. Because that's what the base of the film is, and that's why it is the last image.
Okay. That's very beautiful to give those personal reflections on your beautiful film Santosh, which we hope, of course, will have a lot of screenings, not just on this festival, but around the world in many cinemas. Thank you very much, Sandhya, and all the best with your movie.
Thank you so much. Thank you.